Welcome back to the Flotrack podcast. I'm Kevin Sully. We got music now. We don't have Gordon today, but we have music. Flotrack podcast at gmail.com is the email address. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or on our website, flotrack.org/Flotrack podcast. Never done a podcast solo. Have to admit, this is my first time trying this. We'll see how long we can go, but there's plenty of news to talk about in the running world. And who knows, Gordon may join us later on. But the main topic everybody has been discussing over the past day, well, I'll just read the headline. You probably saw the headline if you're listening to the show. Japan privately concludes Tokyo Olympics should be canceled due to coronavirus. And that's a report from the Times in London. And of course, this set the track world and the Olympic world in general ablaze with people saying, oh no, not again, not again, not again. Now, I should say, didn't take long for there to be denials of the report from the LOC in Tokyo, the IOC. Pretty much everybody up and down the spectrum said that, nope, the Olympics in Tokyo are going on as planned. But in that original Times of London report, they quote, a unidentified senior member of the ruling government coalition. It says no one wants to be the first to say so, but the consensus is that it's too difficult, the source said. I'm reading from the Times report here. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen. So an unidentified senior member of the ruling government coalition. As I mentioned, though, the pushback came shortly after that. Thomas Bach, head of the IOC, said, we have at this moment, this is from an ESPN article, no reason whatsoever to believe that the Tokyo Olympic Games in Tokyo will not open on the 23rd of July in the Olympic Stadium. So here we are. Here we are, and we're in a spot that we are very familiar with in terms of talk of postponements, talk of cancellations. But this obviously is different. This is the big kahuna. This is the Olympic Games. Ever since the last Olympics were postponed, everybody had this one circled. So I think we're a ways away from knowing for certain, obviously, what's going to happen. Bach said something interesting, too, if you've been paying attention to some of his comments recently. He said there is no plan B. He said there is no plan B, meaning, at least the way I interpret it is, the Olympics are going to happen in Tokyo on the dates that are scheduled. That's what I infer when he says plan B. But he also said, and this ESPN article highlights it, he says, Bach hinted that radical changes might be needed to pull off the Tokyo Olympics, which involve 11,000 athletes and tens of thousands of coaches, officials, judges, VIPs, media, and broadcasters. So maybe he's not thinking about plan B the way I think of plan B, but to me, that implies a plan B if you're saying radical changes. Maybe Thomas Bach only operates he has plan A, A1, A2, A3, and A4, because I don't know what a plan B is if it doesn't signify radical changes. Obviously, the big thing that people are discussing is the lack of spectators, because we've seen that all throughout sports throughout the world. That's the easiest thing to cut. This article mentions that the IOC gets 73% of its income, 73% of its income from broadcast rights. So that's what they're concerned about mostly from a money-making perspective is, can we have this to put on television? And in the United States, can we have it on television during those summer months when there is no competition from the NFL or college football? That's important to consider as well here too. So if they don't have spectators, sure, they could still have the Olympic Games and they could make, according to this article, 73% of its income still. They could run it, as Gordon and I have talked about before, on a soundstage, essentially, with nobody in the building, and still make some money. Now, is that what the athletes would like? I don't know. Given that choice versus not having it at all, I'm inclined to believe that they'd rather have it. I think people have come more accustomed to seeing sporting events take place without fans. So people's opinions may have changed over the past year in terms of what's acceptable. Can we still make this the big spectacle, that it deserves to be while doing it in a safe manner? I think there's a couple other plan B, C, and D, though, that should be considered other than just limiting of spectators. And I think these might come about as well, too. One of which would be limiting the amount of athletes. Because right now you have 11,000 athletes, according to this report. Could we see them dwindle the amount of eligible athletes in order to make this a more manageable event? I'm guessing it's easy for them to cut media. It's probably easy for them to cut VIPs, cut down on the amount of coaching staff. But the athlete number, that's going to be a harder sell. So that's one thing I'm looking at. The other thing I'm looking at is how set are they on that time frame? Now we know, well, we don't know really what the rate of vaccination will be. We don't know how much of the world will be vaccinated in time for this to go off safely. We do know there's a vast disparity between how countries are getting access to the vaccine and how many vaccines are being put in people's arms, right? And it's all over the board. And I think that's going to continue to happen. But would there be more clarity if they push it back a couple months? Does Tokyo want to mess around with it and move the time frame back? That's a really difficult problem, right? With venues being locked down, with different financial commitments already being made, stadiums probably being used for other purposes. Although during the time of a pandemic, I don't know if there's going to be a U2 concert in Tokyo that they're going to be knocking off. So it just opens up, obviously, a huge logistical challenge here. Another thing that should be considered, and I say it here, I think Gordon's going to be joining us shortly. I'll have him explain this, but he sent out a tweet yesterday about how it might be worth exploring giving every individual state their own bubble. Each individual sport, their own bubble. So 50 different cities around the world, and they have their own bubble. Again, a lot of logistical challenges there, because what do you do with some of these larger sports like track and field? Because we want to compare it to the NBA, right? Who had a very successful bubble last season, but the amount of athletes involved in an NBA bubble is relatively small compared to track and field or some of these other sports. Is it more difficult logistically to have 50 different sites set up than one big one in terms of scale? Because you're going to have a testing setup in each place. You're going to have all that security set up like you would for any other sporting event. So when I initially thought about this a couple months ago, when we thought, okay, things will be okay by the Olympics, we'll be able to get it all sorted out by the Olympics, I thought the Olympics were a natural fit for this, not in the way you may have thought, but in the way of the athletes' village is used to being separated from the rest of the city because of security reasons. So it almost creates its own bubble. So if you could figure out a way to have the people in the bubble tested frequently, or now that we have a vaccine, could it work within that bubble? Obviously, the dynamic that's vastly different is just the volume of people coming and the different areas of the world where they're all congregating for these Olympics. That's different. That's not something that Major League Baseball deals with. That's not something that Premier League deals with. That's not something that the NBA deals with. The volume of people coming from every single corner of the globe to compete. So obviously, this is going to be something that nobody is going to believe is a sure thing until we get much closer. And I'm thinking about it in the short term with the Olympic trials. The Olympic trials are coming up even sooner than the Olympics. So how is that going to go off? How are the Olympic trials going to be able to take place? Obviously, different logistical challenges because we're all in the United States, but that's a big track meet. That's a big track meet that needs to take place. I think Gordon Mack now is joining us from his home here in Austin, Texas. Gordon, I did the first 15 minutes, 10 minutes solo. It was like I was an AM radio host in the morning, except I couldn't toss it to commercial or to weather. We also had an intro song that you missed. We've been doing pretty good without you. We've made a lot of changes.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't want to make you repeat what you said, but can you give me a 2-sentence highlight of the past 15 minutes that I just missed? So then I'm caught up and I can dive right back into the pod.
Well, we read your tweet. I said that's going to be logistically difficult for 50 different sites. I don't know if that's easier than one site with all the testing infrastructure. I talked about how Thomas Bach, head of the IOC, who you tagged in a tweet yesterday, props to you for doing that. Got to shoot your shot out there. He said there's no plan B, but then in the same article, it says Bach hinted that radical changes might be needed to pull off the Tokyo Olympics. So he doesn't think that there should be a plan B, but he's talking about radical changes. So we talked about how do they cut the number of athletes, right? I think they can cut the number of support personnel. They can cut the number of VIPs and media like they've done in other sports. Do they cut the number of athletes? Are they comfortable? Is it even possible to move it another month or two into a safer window? The article that you sent me from ESPN indicates 73% of the revenue comes from TV. So I'm operating under the assumption if they have no spectators, they'll be fine. But I mean, you sent out the tweet. You're the one who put out the call to the IOC, the USOC, everybody to rally around your proposal. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, even the number 50 doesn't need to be 50. It could be like 15, right? Where it's you're just basically finding a way to, I mean, how many was it? 20,000 athletes? Is that the normal village? Is that the typical
I had the number.
Village?
I had the
What's
number.
The number
You're right.
Typically
it
dealing
is.
With?
I got it here on my phone. So in the 2016 Summer Olympics, there were 11,238 athletes from 207 nations.
So 11,000 athletes, and then how much staff? I'm assuming
probably double that. Probably
double
right?
that. So
just to be safe.
Let's say it's about 20,000 people. 20,000 people at one location. What if it was 1,000 people at 20 locations? I just feel like it would be easier to handle. You know, look at the NBA. They were able to do a bubble where they were able to handle probably 1,000 people in one location. I feel like if you look across the globe, you can find at least 20 Disney-type campuses in the world. I mean, there might not be a Disney park, but there might be some college campus or something, you know, maybe there's something in Asia we don't know about. You know, we could find 20 types of Disney worlds. I mean, we could always use another Disney world, right? That's how it goes. But I mean, I was texting back and forth with Ryan Fenton about it, and he's like, "Hey, I don't think your idea will work." Thomas Bach. I when I tagged him, I was like, "Oh, he has Twitter." And then if you look at his Twitter, his last tweet was like from 2016, and he has like one tweet. So he was probably like,
"Do any Bernie memes?"
No, he was just he didn't do a Bernie meme. He was definitely just a guy who was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna create a Twitter for like the young guys, young kids," and then tweets once right before the Olympics start, and then just hasn't tweeted since. But I honestly, people were tweeting at me like all the negatives, and a lot of their negatives I don't think were real. They're like, "Oh, the TV production is gonna be hell." I'm like, well, first of all, there is zero crossover in sports in the TV production. I highly doubt the the cameramen or play-by-play or producers who are doing the Olympic basketball game are also doing the gymnastics game like earlier that day, right? I really think all the sports production crews are segmented, right? So it's not like you need to add more bodies. The bodies are the same.
Well, there might be some first week, second week stuff, but I don't think they're overlapping. Like once they're set up at the venue, they're set up at the venue. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But like in general, I feel and like he was like, well, food's the same because you're feeding the same number of athletes. I mean, the main thing is like it is a little more expensive because you have to secure 20 locations instead of one. But I feel like it wouldn't be 50 to 20 times the cost. I do think it would be a little bit less because I think a lot of the costs would be the same because the scale is equal, right? But
yeah,
the main thing that Ryan told me is like IOC wouldn't do this because the big thing about the IOC, the elephant in the room, is they get the city, the host, to pay for everything. And it's going to be a lot harder to get 20 hosts or 50 hosts to foot the bill than it is to get one host to foot the bill, right? So,
yeah.
And I was like, well, wouldn't the IOC in this once in a lifetime weird situation that they'd be willing to help foot the bill? And Ryan responded with LOL. Yeah, IOC ain't footing the bill for nobody, right? And I was like, well, the NBA foot the bill to try to make the bubble happen, but the NBA is in a different situation where there's like labor unions and there's there's a lot more incentive to like
you want to maintain goodwill, right?
Yeah.
You want to maintain goodwill with the players and the coaches and the franchises.
And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Like, Olympic athletes aren't going to be like, we're protesting the 2024 Olympics because you canceled the 2021 Olympics. It's like, no, they'll still show up. They'll still wear their brandless, bodies where they can't talk about any of the people that sponsor them. That's the one thing I mean, I can go on a tangent about that. We talk about Rule 40 and all these, like, athletes complaining about all of the, restrictions that the Olympics put on an athlete. It's like they only get one time every 4 years to really make their money and show their brand, and the Olympics are preventing all that. And I'm like, we're blaming the wrong person. The problem isn't the Olympics banning branding and banning revenue opportunities. The problem is that we are allowing the sport that we're in to make the Olympics the only thing that matters. That's the problem. I don't think LeBron James's net worth takes a hit because he can't talk about certain sponsors once every 4 years, because he's in a sport where he's going to talk about sponsors a majority of the time, and the pinnacle of the sport is not an Olympic title, it's an NBA title, And I think that's the main problem with our sport, is that we make our pinnacle the worst financial business model for our sport, right? If we were smart, we should make our pinnacle something that happens more often and not a slave to IOC, but that's another story.
This would be obviously devastating to the athletes if it was canceled, because then it's. Did you
read the?
Then it's off.
Yeah, hold on. Did you read the IOC's response late last night?
Yeah, but what are they gonna say? What are they gonna say?
True.
I mean, I'm not saying the initial report, which was very thinly sourced, right? It's referencing an anonymous person within the government. I mean, that could be a lot of different people. But I mean, what are they going to say? They can't say, oh, yeah, it's teetering 50-50 at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
What worries me, though, I wish Thomas Bach would say, we have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, and here it is. Here's all the different contingencies we're considering. Instead, he thinks he's just going to bulldoze right through, and I don't know if that's the smartest way to play this.
I
know it's not the smartest way to play this. Do the MAC plan at least. Put the MAC plan on your board.
Yeah. Well,
doesn't need to be C. It can be like R.
Yeah. Well, before the report came out, he said there was no plan B. Then the report came out. Then my tweet came out. And then he said, well, we're willing to do plan B, C, D. Didn't he?
Well, he said radical change.
Radical change.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm not saying he was sliding into my DMs or anything, but you know, I'm not saying it's not happening. All right. So if it doesn't,
athletes though,
if it does, it does suck.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, big but. I really think it's an opportunity for the athletes to, like I said, like 5 minutes ago, to take back control of their sport and recognize that we should stop relying on the Olympics as the only thing that matters, that gives us purpose. Like, the Olympics shouldn't be the thing that you live, die, and breathe for. It should be your sport that you live, die, and breathe for. And I mean, I think I could see a timeline where it does get canceled, and then, you know, World Athletics steps up. It's like, all right, screw it. We're having Worlds in Eugene, 2021. Or USATF says, screw it. All right. It's not the Olympic trials. It's the USA Championships. You know, Diamond League's like, screw it. All right. Well, we're still having our Diamond League circuit. You know, all the NCAA's like, screw it. We're still having NCAA championships. And I just think that, like,
where does that get them, though? Where does that get them? Because I wish that you were right, but I see the Olympics as elevating track, as putting track in front of people every 4 years. And if it goes away, right, we're just going to move on to 2022 and it'll be Worlds again. And then 2023 will be Worlds again. And then we're going to fall right back into that same pattern. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes here, track's going to build itself back. I'm not as optimistic that something can be constructed that quickly that would make this a beneficial step in the long run. I mean, I'm with you. Okay. I think Diamond League will still happen. I think Diamond League will still happen. I don't think they're going to move Eugene Worlds because think all that stuff's slotted in already, and all the permits and all the commitments and everything like that. They're not going to. You think they're not going to do it in Tokyo, but they would do it in Eugene? You think they're going to have clearance to have a World Track and Field Championships?
Maybe they don't do it in Eugene. I mean, they do it. That's the main thing. The main problem, like I said in my tweet, is that they're trying to handle 50 sports at once. I think a lot of these sports be like, we can do one sport at once.
You think that – I know, but okay, for that to happen, they would need to cancel the Olympics right now, which they're not going to do. If they do cancel it, it's going to come in a couple months, and it's going to be way too close to when these proposed Worlds are going to happen. I think they would do the Diamond League. I think obviously NCAA isn't impacted by this at all, but we would just have two off years. 2020 and 21 would be off years, and then Eugene would be in 2022, and then we'd go ahead with 2023 in Budapest and 2024 in Paris, and so on and so forth. I think that's what would happen. But you'd have all these athletes who just like a complete hole in their career, and I think you see a ton more retirements because a lot of people were hanging on for one more, and then now it's, and I got to go 2 more years, and it's not even going to be an Olympics.
Yeah, it could be like, I ain't going to be here no more. I mean, the Americans might hold on because Worlds is in USA's, and that'll be a great experience. But if they did cancel, I really do think there will be a huge outcry from all the top athletes in track and field begging World Athletics, hey, step up, give us a global championship. And I think they'll be like, they're not going to have an excuse because they're going to be like, yeah, we can do all these Diamond Leagues, but we just can't do that one big one. You know, like I think.
Okay. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that you're right. I hope that you're 100% right. I just think logistically it would be difficult given the time frame. I mean, last year, when did they cancel it last year? When was the actual announcement? Now, we didn't know as much about it then, but didn't it not come until, it was like late April, right?
Yeah, it's like April. Yeah. It was like a month and a half into like the pandemic and people were talking about it and stuff like that.
Right. And again, maybe it's, okay, here we go. March 24th, actually. So it did happen relatively quickly. Yeah. Okay. Different year, different situation. I just think it's going to be tough to fill that hole. You're right. This is the monster that's been created, but it's also the monster that sustains the the sport at this point, and it's the thing that fuels a lot of athletes. All the athletes, right, are working on these Olympic cycles.
Yeah, and I get it. It is. I personally love the Olympics, and I think it is the coolest thing about track and all that stuff. But I just do think that. Do you think there's a reason? There are certain athletes who lose sleep over the Olympics being gone, and there's certain athletes who, when the Olympics are gone, are like, "Oh, that sucks." There's a "oh, that sucks" moment, and they're like, "That is devastating," right? And for us, track and field, it's devastating because we created Olympics as the only thing that matters, right? Because
But
it's
that's
cool and it's
literally
fun.
that's
It's
literally
not
every
every
sport
sport.
that's except for there's very few. Are you watching regular season bobsled? Are you watching regular season badminton? Are you watching regular season archery? Like, are you watching regular season swimming? Like, other than the big
Soccer,
team sports, right? Other than the big team sports, but those are the
tennis,
exception. Those are the exception.
tennis, golf.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
those are
not a
the
team sport.
exceptions. Yeah, but those are the exceptions. It's not that track is an exception. Track is in this bigger pool. Track is more alike to the average Olympic sport than it is different. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I mean I could come. I could. All right, I'm gonna start listening. Basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis, golf, cycling, skateboarding. That's a new one. Snowboarding. Uh,
Stop. Stop.
but I
Stop.
mean, let's be honest. Do you think a snowboarder
No,
would rather win an Olympic gold, or would they rather win the X Games? They would rather win the
I
X Games.
I'm not an X Games expert. I'm kind of surprised it still goes on, to be honest with you. No, but I'm talking track, swimming, gymnastics, figure skating, speed skating, all the
Wrestling, yeah.
things, all the things that get prime time billing, all the things that move the needle in the Olympics are the pinnacle of that sport. And then there's also all those other smaller sports, like I mentioned, archery, diving, all those other small sports that you only see snippets of in prime time. That's a big deal for that sport as well too. So it's not just a matter of what is track need to do differently. It's almost like, what are all these other sports as well? Is there the appetite? Is there the space for all these niche sports still? Again, I wish I knew the answer, but this is something that we've been talking about for decades at this point, more than a decade.
But also, let me play more devil's
I mean,
advocate.
I admire your optimism. And I gotta be
Like,
honest, I'm sort of surprised that you're an optimist, because usually
when
you're a cold realist.
when you're sitting and watching the 2019, you went to Worlds in 2019. Let's pick
Yeah.
one of the races. Pick a race.
Men's
800.
5,000.
Donovan Brazier, 800. Runs
Okay.
142, right? 142? So we run.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the American record.
That race, the build, like the right before it started, when you're watching it, and as an American, you saw an American win, so it was cool. The feeling after it, right? As a fan, the emotions that you went through of the excitement before it, the excitement during it, and the excitement right after, I feel like was equal to the 2016 Olympic 800-meter final.
Yeah, for a diehard track fan, 100%. Minus the fact that there was barely any crowd. But if you had a London 2017 type, yeah, I see them as equal or very, very close. Right?
Yeah.
The Olympics. But yeah, when we talk about an athlete's legacy, an athlete's career, and we count gold medals, we don't exclude world medals, right? Olympics and world championships, we put them on the same playing field. Yeah, 100%.
And I'm like, we should that like.
But I'm in the minority. It's what I'm saying is I'm in the minority. We're in the minority. Like, when you can piggyback onto this big behemoth of the Olympics, it's different. And that's what they do.
Are we in the minority though? Are we in the minority? Are track diehard track fans the minority of track viewership? I kind of don't think so.
In the
If you
Olympics?
take
Yes.
no, hold on, oh no. If you take in a 4-year span the audience of people who watch track, there are going to be a larger percentage of people who watch track because they like track than watch track because it happens to be on TV or happens to
No.
be
For the
a.
Olympics? Do you see?
But
Look at how
like,
many people watch you. Gordon. You know how many people watch track broadcasts. You know.
yes,
You've seen
I know.
numbers before. Okay, and then Google how many people watch the men's 100 final in Rio. Look at how many millions of people. Like, it's not close. It's not close. It's a prime time event.
But like,
It's
okay, what
what's
about this?
on NBC at 8 p.m. You could put anything on there and it's going to get millions of people. And you put on the 100, or you put on the 1500, or you put on the women's 200 with Allison Felix in primetime. There are so many people tuning in. Talk to some
What's
non-track
the
people in your
value?
life the next time the Olympics come around.
What's the value of a passive non-track fan watching your sport? What's the
They're
value of
selling
that?
their ad dollars. They want that
No,
ad
but like
note. They want that
to the
ratings.
sport.
That's what they
No,
want.
just to the sport in general. Like, is like,
That's what we're
I mean,
seeing. That's what we're seeing. It's not much. It's not much, right? Because they just go away.
yeah.
But for the IOC, it's everything. Yeah, 100. Yes, no, I agree with you on that point. I agree with you 100% on that. The value is not, it's not 1-to-1 for sure. You and I watching, because then we go and we consume other stuff and people like us, there's value in that. But I
like,
mean, maybe you convert some people, right? Like your first exposure to track was either running it or you stumbled on it probably during an Olympics. I heard people talking about during Olympics.
yeah, I
So
mean,
it helps you get in.
what gets most track fans is the youth program being telling, "Hey, you want to run be on the track team? Oh, this is fun." And you're like,
Sure.
"Oh, okay, this is what Winter
But the
Meetings is."
idea,
Whoa.
but the idea of, oh, this isn't just a participatory thing. This is a spectator thing. And there's really, really good people all throughout the world. I mean, that's what I remember about it back when I was like 8 years old, because I wasn't looking up start lists for the Brussels Diamond League. But like when the Olympics came on, I'm like, oh, like this is a sport. This is like a pro sport. That's cool. Just like basketball, just like all these other sports.
Yeah, I just have this weird like putting it this like. I know this may sound counterintuitive. I don't know, but like, I feel like the value of 10, say, pick a number, say of 10 million people, of which a million of them are diehard fans. So 9 million passive people watching, non-fans just happen to have it on, and a million diehards. So that's 10 million people watching an event is the
Mm-hmm.
same as only a million diehard fans watching.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Like I just think like, you know, I don't know how we got
All
down
right.
this rabbit hole, but yeah,
Yeah.
basically what I'm trying to say is that like we sometimes like again it sucks and I get it and it is I as a fan I hate it. If I was an athlete I would hate it and all this stuff. It's the worst thing ever. You have your dreams. You think of someone like Jake Riley or Molly Seidel who made the first Olympic team and they may have to retry out again. Like that's like the worst feeling ever, right? I get it.
They may never get the opportunity.
And they may
If the
never get
Olympics
the
are
opportunity.
canceled, yeah,
And I
yeah.
get it. And like getting, you know, getting third at Chicago Marathon isn't going to replace what it would feel like being able to put on the USA jersey on an Olympic starting line. I get it. But I just also think that like this the sport needs to like find a way to like to find more value and purpose outside the Olympics. That's all I'm saying. Like we need
Well,
to, yeah. And I think we
you
do
brought
have
up a good point.
moments of that.
Well, at the marathon, well, you brought up a good point with the 6 people who would really be devastated by this news, which would be the 6 people who are already on the team. But
Yeah.
the marathon has been able to carve that out. They have majors, they have wins, but there's still just something different, as you mentioned. There's just still something different about the Olympics. And I think no matter what you do, that's always going to be there. Something about just the romanticized dream of running for your country is always going to be put above everything else because it's instantly recognizable to your friends and family and people who don't know anything about the Chicago Marathon, don't know anything about a 2:08 PR or a 2:22 run in Boston when the weather was really bad and you beat this really deep field. The Olympics that's a common language for people.
Yeah, and I agree. It is the coolest sporting event, I believe. The most unique sporting event, and it's a sporting event that I think should continue to happen. I don't want to be an anti-Olympic person.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope. Hey, hopefully this podcast becomes a freezing cold take, and it's July, and we're having the Olympics in Tokyo, and it's great.
Yeah.
I just hope that. Yeah. What do you think it's going to happen now that you see the first report, the second report saying it's canceled, the third report saying that's not true, and then the fourth report of our podcast talking about it? What do you think the end result? What do you think the end result is?
I think no spectators, but I think they'll find a way to make it happen, and they might need to reduce field sizes or sport sizes as well too. That's what I'm going with.
Do you think we'll have?
Be a pretty cool take as well.
Do you think we'll have a situation kind of similar to what was his name? The Botswanan 400-meter runner who couldn't run because he was sick?
Isaac McWalla. Yeah, so if we want to get into so if you want to get into the logistics, and I talked about this a little bit in the first hour of the show, which I did solo. Like if you're talking about if you have that number 20,000, because that's the and it could be more than that, but whatever. Say it's like 50,000. It's not unrealistic that many people could have access to the vaccine by the time this starts. But then it's like up to individual countries, right? So then this one country didn't have access to it and they can't send their athletes. Like there's this huge unbalanced playing field with it. And if you do the bubble and then you do all this testing, well, we know from the NBA, right? You're shutting stuff down for a week, 2 weeks. So I guess the situation would be if you go into the bubble, any positive test, you're out. You're done. Go home. Olympics are over for you because by the time you're done quarantining, right, it's like your event's passed. And that raises all sorts of issues too with it. But I think they're going to try to march through this. I think it's going to be like the NFL model. I think Thomas Bach has been talking to Roger Goodell probably just like, how do you just plow through?
How would you feel having to watch a 200-meter Olympic final knowing that Noah Lyles wasn't allowed to compete in the semis because of a positive COVID test?
Yeah.
Like as a fan, how would you would you be like, all right, would it still feel like the Olympics to you? If like a healthy athlete is there because of a COVID test?
Are you saying a 200 final wouldn't have all the big names in it? Is that what you're saying? That'd be the first time that ever happened. Yeah, no, it's going to feel different. 100% it's going to feel different. But I think if all this is laid out ahead of time and everybody knows the rules of the game and they sign on for it and it's this or nothing, then you got to be prepared for that sort of thing to happen. It would obviously be terrible if that sort of thing happened, but I just
say you're in an event.
I just hope. I don't know.
Say you're a 100-meter runner, and no, I don't know. I'm trying to pick of a unique event.
Race
say you're a 1500-meter. Say you're a 1500-meter runner, and Chariot, Ingebrigtsen, and who's their best 1500-meter runner right now? I don't know. Another, say like 3 of the top 4 1500-meter runners can't compete because of COVID, and then you go in the 1500 and you get third. Do you think when they stand on that podium with that bronze medal, they will think like, I kind of got lucky because the 3 dominant athletes I didn't have to race them? Do you think people have put caveat? Do you think people put asterisks on the results if there's widespread notable athletes being removed from the field.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, were there caveats for the other championships that have taken place? Like in COVID? Like college football would be the best example because you had some teams playing like 6 games, some teams playing 11 games. Like that was a pretty, now you didn't, and you had some players miss games. Obviously it's not like you had like the most important player in the most important game sit out, but you definitely had a lot to quibble with. I think people just accept it and move on like an injury. And then they say this year was kind of screwed up, but we did it.
I would say though, there's yet to be like a notable removal of an athlete in the COVID era where people really recognize like, hey, that check, because it may affect a regular season game. Like when Trevor Lawrence didn't play for Clemson, they lost, but like everyone didn't care about it because they knew they could go on and win the rest of their games. In the regular season right now in the NBA, COVID people are playing G Leaguers, but people don't really care about the losses because they recognize it doesn't matter. But the question is, will there ever be a removal of a LeBron James from the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, and then they go on to lose? You're like, hey, is that fair?
Yeah. No, you're right. We haven't had something that clear cut, but I mean, we've had other stuff that's nibbled around the edges for sure. Okay, let's touch on a couple other stories before we go. Unless, do you need to hop off early? Do you want me to close the show by myself?
Did you explain where I was to the people?
I just said maybe you'd be joining us later. That's all I said. I said maybe you'd be joining us later. But then you called. I was going to put you on and be like, oh, I'm also taking live calls. Gordon and Austin, hello, you're on. And then I was going to hold the phone up, but I didn't do that. Since we started recording, Molly Seidel formally announced she's with Puma. We also have pro news about Fiona O'Keefe. And then the American Track League kicks off this Sunday with some big name kicking off their indoor season.
Yeah, Fiona O'Keefe going pro. Another, it's kind of wild that she transferred to New Mexico.
New Mexico, man.
And
New Mexico. They just create pros.
New Mexico bump, right?
And you don't even have to run for them.
I know, right? Who would have
thought?
You
enroll in classes there, and then you just get a pro deal. I'm going to see if Joe Franklin can just put me on the roster for 20 minutes. Just see what happens to my professional career.
Hey, why did you come to New Mexico? Because I want to go pro. You know, they say, but 99% of athletes go pro in something other than sports. The 1% all go to Mexico. That's how it works. So the 1% all go to New Mexico.
Is he like the John Calipari of NCAA running? Just a factor.
He's definitely the John Calipari of like recruiting, international recruiting and transferring. But
does John Calipari like EDM music? I'll have to check to see if John Calipari likes the same sort of music.
Dude, in the college basketball, North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky all suck. Isn't that wild?
Last time you were asleep for so long, you forgot what we talked about last episode. Okay, Seidel to Puma. Anyway. Any thoughts? We already kind of talked about this already.
Kind of already talked about it. I mean, Saucony clearly is kind of doing we don't want to spend money anymore. I think COVID is a big reason why they're not trying to extend athletes for another 4 years. I think they probably just are having I'm just speculating. I bet they have big budget cuts in their athlete sponsorship department. And even if you made the Olympic team, you still get cut, right? So, but good for Molly to be able to find a new sponsor in Puma. Puma looks like they're putting a big investment in running, which is always great. It's a cycle, right? They go hard and then slowly it falls off. But now Puma went hard like 10 plus years ago. Now they kind of now they finally are able to respend all the Usain Bolt money back into the sport, right? And a Bolt to spend money on. So now they can spread it out to the Molly Seidels of this world.
I think he's still making money. He's still sponsored.
Yeah, but not as much.
He's not making those bonuses. Yeah. He's on that lifetime deal. Sunday, American Track League in Fayetteville. You have Trayvon Bromell, Andre DeGrasse in the 60. 400 features Fred Curley, Quincy Hall. 60 hurdles, Grant Holloway. Shot put, Ryan Krauser. Vashti Cunningham is in the high jump. The 300 has some big names: Ashley Spencer, Corey Carter, Tiana Daniels, Jenna Brandini, Kenny Harrison, Gabby Thomas. The 60 has Daniels and Harrison. The 400, Shamir Little and Wadelin Jonathas. Who are you most excited to see?
Well, if you look at the start lists, I'm excited to.
Which I did, and I just read them to you.
Yeah, well, if you look even closer, you'll notice that Gabby Thomas goes by two pseudonyms. One, when she's running the 60, she's Gabby, but when she's running the 300, she's Gabrielle. Did you notice that?
I did. I also noticed. Click on the men's side.
Yeah.
Grant Holloway, and then next to him is Trey Holloway, which there is a Trey Holloway. I just Googled his name, hurdler for Hampton, but I thought it'd be Trey Cunningham, and someone just did an autofill on the Holloway all the way down. So
what do you think a Trey Cunningham and Grant Holloway hybrid athlete would look like? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they'd run like
Trey Cunningham running well
like
Florida State. He's gonna probably win the NCAA title. But yeah, so sorry, I got distracted. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what DeGrasse does. We haven't seen Andre DeGrasse.
Oh wow, it's his brother. It's his brother. I just look at this. Wow. Yeah, I'm an idiot. Yeah, I'm looking at his page on Hampton. Son of Latasha and Stan Holloway, has one brother, Grant, 16.
There's one brother, Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, you might have heard of him.
I'm excited to see Andre DeGrasse and Trayvon Bromell. Kind of reminds me of flashback to 2015 when they were dominating the NCAA for Baylor and USC. Went on to tie for third, which is crazy. I can't believe they still just were like, yeah, you tied. It's like, no one ties. It's impossible to tie someone, but hey, they tied. And then, so I'm excited to see what they do in a 60. I'm excited to see the Quincy Hall, see how he does. I mean, he's training still with South Carolina, so not much will be different there. But Quincy Hall, I feel like, is definitely the rawest elite athlete we have. I feel like he still has so much more potential ahead of him and has really yet to really tap his fullness. I think Quincy Hall will be super dominant by 2024. So I'm excited for that. But overall, I wonder how fast things are going to be. Like, I wonder what shape these athletes are in. I wonder what effort level they're putting in. You know, like especially in the 400, right? Because 60, you kind of, it's only 60 meters. You can go hard and run fast.
Sure.
But in the 400, like, are we going to be like, what do you think the winning 400 time is? I'll put it the over under. If I had to put the winning 400 time of over under, I'll put the over under at 45.3. What would you put it at?
That's a good line.
Isn't that fast when you think about it?
I'll go under. I think they're going to surprise us. Because I'm with you. I'm inclined to think, oh, they're going to be cautious. I know it's been a while, but we've seen big performances in all these one-off meets, right? During COVID, like that has not been the case. We've all expected it to be a little bit rusty, and somebody breaks out. I think Krauser is going to throw the shot really far.
He's already thrown it far this season.
Well, yeah, that's like the most lukewarm take ever. I think Krauser's going to throw it far. This is like all he ever does. I'm interested to see Jonathas in the women's 400. She ran some races last year overseas, and obviously she had that great performance in Doha. I want to see what she does. She's experienced running indoors as well too. But yeah, I could see a couple breakout, like, oh man, I can't believe they ran that fast. And I think it could come from Jonathas in the 400, Grant Holloway in the 60 hurdles, and then probably Curley or Hall in the 400, and Krauser speaks for itself. But I think we could see good big perf there. 60 is tough, right? Because 60, it's like, well, Otto Bolden calls it a starting contest, basically. So it's like, if you nail the start, all right, cool, you're good to go. But the margin between a 645 and a 659 is just so small, and there's so many people in that range that it's tough to sort out.
I do think Trayvon's going to run well in the 60. People forget he's the world indoor champion in 2016. And then, later on that year he got hurt, and then we thought his career was over, and then 2020 hits and he's rejuvenated and now looks to be an Olympic 100-meter favorite. So I'm excited to see how fast he runs, because if he comes out there and runs he's probably only going to run like 6.5.
6:47 is his PB. 6:47 is his PB.
He's probably going to run 6 mid-5s, I bet. But if he goes out there and runs like a 6.5 low, it'll be pretty good. Especially, it's kind of wild when you really think about our sport that like there'll be an athlete who every day is training, live, sleep, and die for training. Live, sleep, drink. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Eat, sleep, and breathe.
Yeah. Eat, sleep, and breathe. Training, right? Then he's going to drive 40 minutes to an airport, sit in an airport terminal for another 30, 40 minutes, go through security, sit on an airplane for 2-3 hours, land, get off the airplane, drive to a facility, go to a hotel, stay up, watch some HBO on or HBO Max or Hulu, Netflix, sleep in, wake up, lollygag in a city you're not from for 8+ hours, get to the facility, do a 1-hour warm up, and then you do your job for 6 seconds, and then you go home. Like, it's just like wild when you think about it. Like, you spend all this time, you travel across the country, you train every day, and you gotta do your job for 6 seconds. It's like, can't we do this virtually or something like that, right? That's like the one thing is like, hey man, I get it. I gotta like spend like all this time just to do my 6-second job. Can I just like send you an email?
Yeah. And sometimes in certain cases, after all that, people false start.
Yeah, that's even the worst. Yeah, they false start.
Traveled all the way to Europe, and I false started for one race. All right. We'll leave it there. Flotrackpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Alon, are we gonna get the music on the outro too so Gordon can hear it? I don't know if we can do that. It might be too ambitious for one show. If Gordon doesn't like the music, we're gonna do it anyway.
We have music now?
Yeah, so I told you in the intro. Oh, there it is. There it is. All right, thanks everybody. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.